The sulfur dioxide will, in the presence of ash, produce the sulfur trioxide. Together, the sulfur trioxide will combine with water to form acid. We'll talk about that more later when we talk about acid rain, but just imagine it irritates your lungs similar to how nitrogen dioxide irritates your lungs, because it's a corrosive gas that will, break bonds in your lungs, cause your lungs to, give off more water to try to deal with it, and just in general inhibit the breathing and your lung capacity. Particulate matter, the problem with particulate matter, these are these tiny particles. They're not gases. They're little clumps of minerals and other bits that don't get completely, burned up in combustion reactions. These little tiny particles, you may not be able to see them, but they can get into your lungs. They can get into your eyes, nose, throat, and cause irritation. For sick people, it's really bad because it can cause respiratory distress and heart attacks. So they've shown when the particulate matter is high due to a lot of industrial activity, or the weather conditions just exist such that things get blown around into certain areas, there can be a higher incidence of heart attacks on those days for people who are already kind of distressed. It can overstress their hearts. Okay, so it's dangerous. That's why we try to limit the amount of particulate matter, and we have ways of alerting the public when particulate matter concentrations get too high beyond safe limits. Something else, well, I'll tell you more about particulate matter in the next activity, but anyway, those are the problems. So far now, going back to our air quality standard chart, now this shouldn't just look like a bunch of words and numbers to you. At this point, you ought to have enough chemical knowledge to look at carbon monoxide, know its sources. Nitrogen dioxide, know its source. Ozone, know the nasty stuff that it is, what its source, what its chemical formula is, where it comes from, and why it doesn't stick around for very long. Lead, we looked at its particulate matter. Lead now in the United States is not quite as much of a problem as it used to be because we've gotten rid of the fuel additive tetraethyl lead. So we still monitor it because at one point it was a big health problem because lead causes neurological damage that's irreversible. So it builds up. The more exposure you have, it's very slow and it's hard to tell at first, but it causes neurological damage. And also can cause damage to the bone marrow. So it was bad, but that's why we've dealt with it so well here in the United States. But if you travel outside the United States, or if you live outside the United States, you want to be aware of that. That other countries don't have quite so stringent rules as we do. And then the particulates, there's two different sizes of particulate matter, 10 microns and 2.5 microns. And the smaller the particulate matter, the more dangerous it is. And that's why the limits are set lower for the smaller particles. And I can tell you right now, I was going to tell you later, but these little teeny tiny particles, you can breathe them in and they can get embedded down in your lungs and you don't breathe them back out. And then over time it can collect. And a problem with this, for example, is over time, if you keep breathing in these little tiny dust particles, it causes your scar tissue to build up in your lungs and you can get serious lung disease. And then your lungs try to fix themselves and it builds up. It's like a catch-22 and the problem gets worse and worse. This is the kind of thing that happens to people who get black lung, who are exposed to dust over years and years in coal mines, and or if you work outside a lot where there's a lot of dust and you don't have proper respiratory protection. It may not seem harmful in the short term, but in the long term, it can continue to damage your lungs because those particles do not leave your lungs. They get embedded down in there. Scar tissue builds up and whatnot, and the lungs just stop functioning, and it just causes all kinds of other health problems. So it's not to be taken lightly. And then the sulfur dioxide, finally, you should be aware that it comes from, the coal has small amounts of sulfur, and that's where that particular pollutant is coming from.